Okay, today what we're going to do is we're going to continue with 4-2. If you remember, we did this before we went on break. We're still looking at graphs of functions, and we're still looking at some tables. Remember with this, we wanted to check and see which ordered pair is a solution. What did we do with these? How do we find out? Yes?
You have to move it around so the y is on one side, so you have the right equation, and then substitute the 2 for x and the 3 for y.
All right. Technically, we don't have to switch the equation around. We do when we graph. But you're right. We take the x and we take the y and we plug them into that equation and it should check, right? If it checks, that means it's a solution and that dot is on the line. Okay? If it doesn't check, then that means that the dot is off the line. And again, we take the x and the y ordered pair and we plug them into the equation just the way it is. Okay? All right, let's keep going. All right, this equation, this is what you were talking about. We're going to solve for y. So if I have x plus y equals 4, how do I get y by itself? Yes?
You minus x on both sides.
Very good. So I'm going to subtract x on both sides, and I'm going to go y equals, which should come first? Yes? The x comes first. So I'm going to go minus x plus 4. Okay? And then we make a table, and then we graph it, correct? This is the hardest part for students. This is the hardest part. So we're going to get a worksheet in the next couple of days, and we're going to just solve for y for different equations. Okay? All right, let's keep going. We had these. What was the trick on these equations? So if I get y equals -3, what was the trick that I told you to do? Yes. Very good. He's right. So I'd find -3 on my y-axis, I'd put a dot, and then I draw my line, right? It's a horizontal line. And so if I go back and I go x equals 2, pardon? Okay, so then I got x equals 2. I do the same thing, but I find where x is 2, and I draw my line like this, right? And it's my vertical line. Those are really important because they're going to come and haunt us later, especially when we do slope. All right? So make sure you understand them. Let's look at day 2 now. All right, notice that I have graphed the function, and I have a function. Notice it is y equals. But what's different about this compared to what we had before? Yes?
Y is already by itself.
Y is already by itself. What's the other thing that's different? Yes?
X is greater than or equal to?
Yeah, x is greater than or equal to 0. Now, on the last equations, I got to choose my x's, didn't I? What were the values that I put in for x? Yes. Right, -1, 0, and 1. I wanted a negative, I wanted a neutral, and I wanted a positive, right? This is going to be different here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an x here, I'm going to put my equation here, and I'm going to put my y here. Okay? Now the values that I plug in, I still have choice, but they're saying I can only choose a certain amount of numbers. Now, do you see where x is greater than or equal to? See the equal to? So that means 0 can be included. So I'm going to write 0 down. So I'm going to include that number right there. So I'm going to start with that one. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solve my equation. I'm going to put in 0. It's a two-step equation. And I'm going to draw my line. Okay, now, x is greater than or equal to 0. So I chose my 0. What would be another number that I could choose? 1, because it's bigger than 0, right? So I'm going to choose 1. And I get 4. Okay, I want 3 dots. So what would be a good number to choose now? Yes? Sure, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Could I choose -1? No, why not? Yes. Correct. It has to be bigger than 0 because that's what it told me to do. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do my math. Okay, and then it says to plot the points. So I'm going to plot 0, 2. One, 4, and 3, 6. And then I'm going to stop right there. So I took my ordered pairs from my table and I plotted my dots. Okay? Don't draw your line yet. Now, go back to your table. Okay? 0 was my starting number, wasn't it? You see that? So I started with 0, 2. And then I chose more numbers, correct? So when we graph, I started with this dot here and I went up. So this is called a ray. It's not a line. I don't have arrows on either side. Think of it like a rocket ship. I've got to start and it blasts off. Hopefully it doesn't go backwards, because it does, it's like boom, right? Yeah. So when you have something that looks like this symbol right here, you're going to have a ray. You're going to have a ray. Now, it asks you to identify the range. Okay? So the range is your Y, correct? It starts at what? 2 right here. See it? Right? So I'm going to put my 2 down. And is my Y value getting bigger or smaller? It's these numbers, 2, 4, 6, they're getting bigger. So it's going to be Y is greater than or equal to 2, and I'm done. It's always Y. I grab the first Y value and then I take a look at my numbers. If my numbers got smaller, I flip that inequality value. So there's no guesswork. It's right there on your table and it shouldn't be hard to understand how to pick out the numbers. Questions? Super. Let's keep going. All right? Graph the function with the domain x is greater than or equal to 4 and identify the function. So what do I do first? Yes. I'm going to make the table, right? And it already solved for y, isn't it? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my table because I already got it in the y form. You want to make sure it's in the y form. Okay. Now, what numbers do I plug in? What do I start with? Yes. 4. Okay. I get it because it's right here. It's the number that's listed. So I'm going to go 4. Now what should I choose? Yes. Why? If it was less than or equal to, I would have chosen 3. But it's bigger than it, isn't it? So I'm going to put 5. Now what do I choose? Sure. Okay, I got my table, got my three values. Now what do I do? Yes?
Graph it.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to graph it. So 4, 0. Four, 0, 5, -1, 6, -2. Okay, so I'm going to look at my start, right? So I'm going to go back here, and this is my start. So I'm going to grab that dot, it's right here, and blast off. So if you know where to start, you know which way to go. Let's take a look at my range, because it asks me to identify the range. What variable goes with the range? Y. So I'm going to go Y. What number am I going to put? 0, because that's right here, right? Right? And then are my values getting bigger or smaller? They're getting smaller, so it's going to be less than or equal to. So it's going to change. It's going to be different than the last one. Okay, questions? All right. All right, we're going to take a look at problems 5 and 6 in your book. I'm not going to put it on the smartboard. I'm going to leave it, but we'll talk a little bit about it. So maybe you can look at your book and listen. Okay. So problem 5, you might want to look in your book. Okay, and leave it right there. The distance d in miles that a runner travels is given by the function d = 6t, where t is the time in hours spent running. The runner plans to go for 1.5-hour run. Graph the function and identify its domain and range. Okay. So what they did was they took the function d equals 6t. Okay? What would be my input, d or t? It's t. It's the number you put in, and d is the output. Okay? Alright. Now it says that the runner plans to go for an 1.5-hour run. Okay? So what do you think my beginning value would be? Well, think about running. When you first start off, how long have you run? 0. So you put 0 in, right? So that's 0. Okay? Right? And then you choose something in between. So you go like 1. And then you could choose another one, but then this one would be 1.5. Because you're not going to run past an 1.5. So you have to kind of understand what the problem says. Right? So you end up getting 9. And if you look in your book, they actually have a nice little table there for you. They just don't have an H table. Okay? All right, so your input, if you notice, and you kind of came up with this yourself, what is the smallest value of t? 0. What's the largest value for t? 1.5. Okay, see it right here? Okay, so my range would be d, and you see how I've got two inequalities that look like this? So I'm going to mirror that here. So it's going to look similar to t. What is the beginning value for d? 0. So I'm going to put 0 here, and what would the other one be? 9. So I got it from here, and I got it from here, and this is my range.
And that shows it could be bigger. Like 9 could be. Oh,
It can't get bigger than 9, but it can be less than, yes. So it's squished in between. Yeah, very good. Now, look at the graph that they have there. What do you notice about that graph? When they graph those values,
It's not arrows.
there's no arrows because it has a beginning point, which is 0, 0, and an ending point, which is 1.5 and 9. So there are no arrows. Okay? Okay, let's take a look at number 6 in the guided practice. Number 6. It says, for gas that costs $2 per gallon, the equation C equals 2G gives the cost C in dollars of the pumping G gallons of gas. You plan to pump $10 worth of gas. Graph the function and identify its domain and range. Okay, so I'm going to set up a table. What's the function? What's the equation? Yes. Good. C equals 2G. What's my input, C or G? G. This is C. Okay, now, what would be my beginning value? Well, it's going to be 0 because I don't have to put anything in my car, right? I could put a half a gallon, or I could put a quarter of a gallon, or I could do whatever. So I'm going to put in 0. Okay, and then I've got a value in here. And what's my ending? What's the amount that I can totally put in? You plan to pump $10 worth of gas. C is the cost. 5. Right. So this is going to be 5. So you kind of work backwards, don't you, to get that. And then what do I put in here? 1, 2, 3, whatever, as long as it's between 0 and 5. So I'm going to put in, I don't know, 1. This is easy. Correct? Okay? So my domain is G. What's my smallest value for G? 0. What's my largest value for G? 5, right? Okay? Let's do my range. Range is my C. What's my smallest value for C? 0. What's my largest? 10. Notice I'm getting it right here. So I got 0 and I got 10. Okay? Now I need to graph it, don't I? So it asks me to graph it. Okay? So I'm going to graph it. Okay. My first ordered pair was what? 0, 0, 0. Okay, and then 1 what? 5. Okay, it's right there. And then 2, no, what was my other one? 5, 10. 10, right? Right up here. Oh, let's look at my ordered pairs. 1, 2, thank you. 1, 2, I read my ordered pairs wrong. Okay, now, what kind of line am I going to draw? Non-continual, which means what? Yes.
You don't use arrows.
No arrows, do I? I have a beginning and an ending point. So here's my beginning, and there's my ending, right? Okay, so here's a hint. Okay, if you have a domain where you have numbers like 1, 2, 3, then your range, you're going to have dots. And I would write this down. Some of you are fixing your hair. You might want to pay attention. You might want to write this down because you're going to need it. So remember when we first did this and they gave you the domain? Then you just had dots. Okay? When none given, like you have no domain given, that's going to be a line. And those are like if I chose -1, 0, and 1, there were no restrictions. If I have something like x is greater than or equal to 2, or x is less than or equal to 7, okay, you're going to have a dot and an arrow going off in the other direction. It's called a ray. And if you have something like this, where you have a number here and you have a number here, okay, you're going to have a dot like this. And your range, I should put range in here. You didn't even put the range in here. The range. Well, your range would be numbers. Here, there'll be numbers. Here, they're going to look like this. And here, your range is going to look like this. So it could be like whatever numbers you want, like 1 and 7. Here, this could be like 2 and -9. I mean, it could be numbers.
You leave that.
Yep, I'll leave it up there. You might want to write this down because this is going to help you when you do your assignment. Any questions on this? So when you do your homework today, you might want to leave this off. And I would write it down. I would write it down. Just so you have it, because then you'll look at it when you're doing it and then it'll make a lot of sense.